Thank you, Bishop. Mike Shockley, Chair of the Board of Pension and Health Benefits. As the Bishop has indicated, we're ready to bring forth the action item that was deferred from yesterday. I would move the health allowance as found on page 9, lines 1 through 8 of the workbook.
All right, so this is properly before us. It's coming from a committee. There is an amendment, right? Proposal. Microphone 3.
Nan K. Skinner, Trinity United Methodist Church, Lincoln. I have an amendment. The amendment would be to delete from on line 7 the phrase "and are not eligible for the $15,850."
All right, is there a second?
And add in its place, that's all right, add in its place, full-time and three-quarter-time pastors appointed to local churches that provide a health insurance plan shall receive the equivalent of the conference health allowance.
Second. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second. Nan, speak to it, please.
Bishop, the current way the health allowance plan reads in our workbook, anyone who serves a any pastor who is full-time or three-quarter church that has its own health plan will not be eligible for the $15,850. In speaking to the Board of Pensions, their understanding was that if a church had their own health insurance plan, that then the pastor's health insurance would be fully covered. That is not true. At Trinity, the pastors receive the same amount as all of the rest of the staff, which is 25% of our health insurance. So our health insurance is approximately $16,000. The church covers $4,000 of it, and the other $12,000 comes out of the pastor's compensation. And so this is simply equity for those pastors who serve churches where there is a health insurance plan, that those persons would receive the same equivalent as other pastors.
All right, so could you please restate what you are inserting, and so that
Yes.
That way that could come before us and we can debate it.
The statement would read, clergy appointed to churches with 50 employees or more shall be provided coverage by their church in accordance with ACA guidelines. Full-time and three-quarter pastors appointed to local churches that provide a health insurance plan shall receive the equivalent of the conference health allowance.
All right. Now, look at the 50 employees, okay? That's a very limited number of churches in our whole conference. I just want to point that out. Okay, so the amendment is before us. Full-time and three-quarter-time appointments appointed to the local churches will receive the allowance.
Correct.
All right. Is there any debate on the amendment? If you would adopt the amendment as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Amendment has been adopted, so now we have the health allowance as has been amended, and then I don't have the exact verbiage for that, but I'm sure the Secretary has it, so you can read it. All right, so this is now the motion. All right, microphone 2.
Mary Brooks, Laity, Linden, Kansas.
Okay.
Bishop, I move resolution number 13,
right,
which is found on page 22, be substituted for the Board of Pensions recommendation on page 9,
okay,
lines 2 and 3, ending with the words "at bronze plan," regarding the health insurance allowance, with an editorial correction to line 44.
Okay, before you go on, Mary, is there a second to that? Okay, there's a second. Go ahead.
Okay. Line 44 should read $15,850.
Okay.
Thought that was fixed. If I may speak to that.
Oh, yes, please do.
First, I believe in taking care of our clergy. The intent of this resolution is to correct unintended consequences that came about when we moved from conference insurance to pastors purchasing their insurance through the Affordable Care Act. By paying the allowance directly to the pastor, we created an unfairness both to the clergy and to the local church. We also muddied the distinction between health insurance benefit and salary. The current system is unfair to the clergy because a pastor on Medicare, a pastor who is carried on a spouse's insurance, and a pastor who provides the health insurance for their entire family all receive the same amount. It's unfair to the local church to pay more for insurance than it's actually costing the pastor. To remedy this unfairness, this resolution requires the local church to only pay the actual amount of the insurance up to the $15,850.
All right, so we have a substitute motion on the floor. We're going to deal with that now. We're off the main motion. We're going to deal with the substitute motion. Is there any debate about that? Okay, microphone 4.
Andy Hargrove.
I'm sorry, Andy, you have a blue, so you have a question, okay? Go ahead.
Andy Hargrove, clergy, Wellington, Kansas. I actually have 2 questions. The first is, I'm not sure how this all works, so I don't know if the motion maker can answer it or somebody else.
Scott Brewer or
Yeah,
Zach,
probably.
please begin moving to the mic.
If this
Or somebody that
passes,
can answer the question, Peggy or someone. Go ahead.
and I start receiving officially employer health care, does that mean I will no longer be eligible for the ACA, which means I will no longer get a subsidy, which means my local church will pay the full freight cost of insurance for my entire family without the subsidy? And the second question is, based on the timing of when insurance rates, at least on the ACA right now, are done, what will this do to church budgeting in terms of the timing of availability for what the cost for insurance will be?
All right. Who's going to help us answer that question?
Scott keeps looking at me. and
You're all
so-
looking at each other, right, trying to debate that. You're debating. Okay.
Yeah.
Mike, you want to deal with that? Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
So Andy, if I understand your question right, you're asking if you are in an appointment that has 50 employees or more first. Is that an accurate?
No. Under the current motion, I would begin receiving employee coverage, which would make it tax-benefited coverage. That's part of the point of what's going on here. I believe that that means I'm no longer eligible to apply for coverage on the ACA. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. The follow-up question was more directed at the maker of the motion. What will this do to church budgets and the timing of availability for information for how much clergy health care costs are going to be? When will that be available to the local church for making budgets?
I might clarify also, I don't believe the intent was to pay the insurance for you, but to actually pay you the amount, so that wouldn't change as far as the Affordable Care Act. As far as timing, I believe most of us know in the fall, fairly soon, at least we do in the private sector, as to what our health insurance cost is going to be for the next year.
Thank you, Mary. All right, what do we have? We have a microphone 3 amendment. You'd like to amend the substitute motion?
It may just be an editorial amendment. Linda Stokes, laity from Lenexa, the maker of the motion, commented on line 44. It needs to be $15,850. That is also true on page 23 on line 7. $15,850. Do I need to write that as amendment, or is that just an editorial?
I hate to go into all. It's 850. We're not creating new law or legislation. It is what it is. We'll just make the editorial on that, so we don't need to take action on it. Microphone 4.
Yeah. First off,
State your name and where you're from, please.
Michael Brown, Spring Hill, Bucyrus Clergy. I'm ready to oppose either one, but
Right now we're dealing with a substitute motion,
Okay,
resolution
so
number 13.
Am I opposing substituting that for
No,
the
no.
other, or am I
Right now,
opposing
we're
actual
opposing-
resolution
We're
13?
opposing the actual resolution.
Okay,
we're
so
not-
because she made a motion to substitute.
Right, and that's what we are dealing with. First of all, we
Okay,
need
I
to
would
know.
like to speak to opposing substituting, but is that just like given as soon as a second and we don't have to vote on that?
That's correct. That's already on the floor.
Okay.
All right?
I have 2 minutes, 19 seconds left. As for the resolution then,
Do you have another question? You first came up to the mic asking a question, correct?
I held a yellow sheet of paper.
Yellow, okay.
I was clarifying what I am
Okay,
opposing.
okay.
So the resolution before us, it would create astronomical appointment problems. Every church would want the youngest single male clergy that would not have a large amount of health insurance. However, on top of that, I have a sticking point with the concept that clergy compensation is currently trying to deceive your local church. Every charge conference, we pass a piece of paper for every single clergy you have. It is clergy compensation. On that line, there is a line that says total compensation. Included in that is everything we get. Yes,
Michael,
it is,
direct your comments at me, please, not at the body. Yeah.
yes, it is broken up into salary and benefits as it would be, I presume, everywhere else. But that line for total compensation includes the amount we get in salary, the amount we get in health benefits, and I think if you have any housing, it might even be in there too. That is not hidden. That is available and should be, I believe, per discipline, available if you walk into your church office on Monday and request to see it. It is there, it is passed every year, and this resolution, I believe, is built on false premises. Thank you.
That's a speech against the substitute motion.
Point of order.
Okay,
This is Andrew Connard,
okay, Andrew?
clergy, Barrington United Methodist Church. I have a point of order on the process that we're doing. I believe if the motion to substitute, the process is to perfect the main motion, following perfect the substitute motion, and then vote on whether we would like to substitute it or not.
Okay, you're correct. So we have a substitute motion on the floor. Now we're going to perfect the main motion, vote on it, then go back to the substitute. Just perfect it. All right.
I believe that we perfect the main motion, so if there's any other amendments or changes that we need to make to the main motion, we would do that. After that's complete, we would do any amendments to the substitute motion, and after that's complete, we would then decide if we would like to substitute.
Got it. Okay. All right. Is there any perfection that we need to do to the main motion on sorry, Mary, we're gonna suspend this discussion right now. We're gonna go back to page 9. Are there any other amendments to the health allowance? We're back to the main motion on page 9. Microphone, you're waiting, right?
I'm waiting.
Okay. All right, so there are none. Now do we need to vote on this too? Okay, there are none. So now all right, so there are none. It's good to back to the substitute. So we have one speech against the substitute, all right? Microphone 3. You have a yellow card, so yellow is opposed. Okay, that's 2 speeches to oppose. Do we have a speech in favor? Well, the speaker's speech is in favor of it, so that's 1 and 1. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Right. Baker, Baldwin City First United Methodist Church, Baldwin City, clergy. I want to talk about the unintended consequences of this motion. We were talking about the unintended consequences when we moved to the direct pay system. There are unintended consequences in this as well. I served part-time for a couple of years, and one of the things that I noticed in the small churches that I served part-time is how hard it is when salary costs have gone away to put them back into the budget, and to do so at an amount like $15,850 would be an enormous leap. So if you have a situation where Ross Baker and I go to a couple of churches, and so it's determined which one of those churches is going to pay our health insurance. The other church gets to take that out of their budget for a little while. The difficulty then becomes eventually Ross and Amanda Baker get moved somewhere else, and new clergy are appointed in that church. and suddenly they've got to come up with $15,850 or whatever the new amount is that they've not been paying for a period of time, and that's a real difficulty on local churches. The other unintended consequence I want to speak to is for the appointment of clergy couples. There's no perfect way to do health insurance for clergy couples. We've gone back and forth with a lot of different ways to do this in what was the previous Kansas West Conference. It's one of the reasons we went to dividing up the health insurance cost by number of clergy and then among the number of, or what it costs to cover all the clergy and then by the number of churches, so that it didn't become a bargain to get part of a clergy couple at your church, or a bargain to get somebody who had a career that provided insurance, so that our spouses don't become something that in an appointment, and those appointments get made primarily on missional. So I just hope that the body will consider those things and the harm that could be done by moving to this. Thank you.
That's two speeches against. I'm going to ask that the voting for the clergy ballot one jurisdictional conference would be closed so we can prepare to take the vote for the laity after this discussion is over. So we have two speeches against. Microphone 5.
Yes. NM Patton, Fiati.
Sir, I cannot see what your
Question.
Oh,
I have talked to several people around me, and not a single one of us seem to understand what we're doing with all the amendments. And I would really like to see a written copy of what we're voting on before I vote.
the written copy.
Could I offer a point of order, Bishop?
Yes.
This is Andrew Conner, clergy of Barrington United Methodist Church. I believe it parliamentarian, but I believe that only amendments to the substitute motion are in order at this time as we're perfecting the amendment, perfecting the substitute motion. After the substitute motion has been perfected, then we get to decide which motion we would like to consider.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct. But I thought we were, so I didn't hear any amendments on the substitute motion.
I believe if there's no amendments on the substitute motion, then we would vote to substitute, decide whether we want to substitute it or not.
Okay, all right. So, yes, we are talking about the substitute. No, we're still, there's whether or not we're going to adopt the resolution. But we're dealing with the whole substitute in total. And there's nothing that has been amended. So we're dealing with the whole thing right now. All right, so we're dealing with the substitute motion. As of now, there have been no amendments to the substitute motion, so we're just debating on whether the resolution will be adopted or not. Kevis? Mike? Okay. We can improve it if we need to, but nobody has microphone 4.
McCall Harms, Brazil, Urban Abbey, Omaha. To the previous question, I think there's a lot of confusion. What are we substituting? We've got 2 resolutions we're looking at.
Correct.
Can someone?
Yes. Okay. Let me try my best. Okay.
That.
All right. So we have yesterday the Board of Pensions brought forth a recommendation on page 9. Let's give page 9. On page 9, as to how compensation for clergy appointed to churches with 50 or more persons. That was amended, so we had some language in there that was stricken and other language that was inserted, and we adopted that amendment. Then we had a motion that was presented. We are working to perfect the substitute motion now. We have not had any amendment. Motion is on page 23. Resolution 13, it's there in writing. Nothing has been amended on this resolution. It is there as has been presented. So we're not changing the language. So if you want to know what the resolution is, it's all here. The only thing we did do is we edited 15,800 to 15,850, which reflects the correct allowance. So now we are having speeches in favor or against the substitute motion. So we have two motions going on simultaneously. The main motion from the Board of Pensions, this one is a substitute. We're trying to perfect this. If the substitute moves forward, then that becomes the main one that we're voting on. Are you clear as clear as I am on this? So look at your journal on page 9 and on page 22.
So 22, the one on page 22 is substitute?
It's substituting the one on page 9. It's substituting the one on page. We're talking as to whether or not the body wants to substitute the recommendation by the Board of Pensions with this one. If this does not move forward, then the recommendation is before the body, and then the body will vote on that. Thank you. Microphone 4. That's a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. My name is Kyle Reynolds, clergy at Grace United Methodist Church in Olathe. In the rationale, it states that somebody on their spouse's insurance would not receive a benefit.
Could you please point out in the resolution what line item that?
Yeah, that's line 36, beginning on 35, a pastor who's using spousal insurance, etc. What I'm unclear about is if I'm paying for my part of insurance through my spouse's work, am I eligible to receive money? It does not seem that I'll receive anything based on the text of the resolution, but that's unclear, and I was wondering if the maker of the motion could provide clarity.
Mary, could you provide clarity on that?
Sure. The intent was that whatever your health insurance costs actually are, whether you're buying a Medicare supplement plan, you are paying part of your insurance as being on your spouse with their insurance, or insuring your family on their own, the church would only pay the actual amount that your insurance is costing you.
Okay. Thank you. Microphone 6. We have someone in the back. That's yellow card, so we are opposing the motion. So that'll make it 3 speeches in opposition to the substitute motion. Am I correct? Speech against?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Bishop.
Yes.
Jeff Prothro, serving DeSoto in the Kansas City District. I also have the pleasure of serving on Board of Health and Pensions. And a couple of things. One, we look at this very seriously and we think through very deeply what is equitable and just. And to say that insurance is just in our current state would not be the right thing to do. But I do think the way we seek to offer for the Great Plains Conference our best attempt at both fairness and equity. If we start looking at it simply at a church-by-church basis, what the substitute resolution does, it will create, again, a sense of privilege for some churches and underservice for others. It does call to question churches asking very personal medical questions, which I believe is not acceptable when accepting jobs. So I think that this could have some unintended consequences regarding our current laws, regarding what can and cannot be asked about health. And it does create, for better or for worse, I think for the better at this point with the main motion, the substitute motion does create a tier system within the churches that frankly will make it very inequitable in terms of who gets appointed, who has access to the insurance that they need, and who will ultimately benefit. This creates a level playing field if we stick with the main motion. That's why we need to oppose the substitute motion. Thank you.
Thank you. That's 3 speeches against. Microphone 4.
I have an amendment to amend the line 7 by adding clergy working for churches that have 50 employees will still get the payment. That's a summary of
Okay,
that amendment.
I'm looking
offered.
at resolution. I do not see a line 7 that talks about 50
No, the
employees.
main resolution,
No,
page
we're not,
9.
but we're not on the main resolution right now. Right now, we're in the substitute motion. We're perfecting that or debating that right now. So when we come back to the main motion, if that is the motion, then we can perfect that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 3. Microphone 3.
Okay. Yes.
All right.
Terry Lucas, I serve Osceola and Shelby Parish in Nebraska. So what I understand I'm sitting is that we're looking at resolution 13 to substitute.
That is correct.
Okay. So if this passes, then it wipes out what was amended on page.
That substitute motion then becomes the main motion.
Right.
And
So then it takes away everything that the work was done prior to this, right?
Yes.
Okay. It seems like we're going. It's 2 different subjects.
That's right. And that's why
So
we
that's
are
what's
talking
really
about
muddy about this and confusing.
I understand. I feel your pain. Someone
Point
got
of
a point
order.
of order. Yes, Jesse?
Jesse Lipp, St. Paul's Lenexa laity. I'm not entirely sure of the intent of the speaker asking about the main motion. However, because we are doing an amendment by substitution, in order to both amend the substitute motion to perfect it,
right,
and to amend and perfect the original form of the motion. And then we can vote, once both motions, the original motion and the substitute are perfected, we would then vote on which version we want.
Correct.
So I'm not entirely sure of the speaker's intent, but if he was wanting to amend the original motion, that is currently in order.
Right now, we are discussing the substitute motion.
Correct. And it is in order to both amend the original motion and to amend the substitute, because in order to decide which version of the motion the body wants to adopt, they have to have the perfected version of both.
We will perfect the substitute motion now, and then once that's done, we'll go back to the main motion to perfect that as well. And then we will vote on the substitute motion and move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Point of order. Another point of order. Okay. Who's got the point of order?
4. Over here.
Number 4.
4? All right. Microphone 4.
Melissa Cavillo, laity, Salina. Has the bishop declared the substitute motion as well as the original piece of legislation? Have you, I thought you already ruled them perfected. Is that not correct? Okay.
No, what I was saying is that there have been no amendments as of now to the resolution. So I'm considering it as already perfected because there's been no amendment to it. So we're not, right now we're just debating the merits.
Pardon me. Bishop, once you've declared it perfected, then we need to move to vote to substitute or not.
Well, then let me...
So your ruling would really help us as to, have you declared our original motion perfected, and have you ruled our substitute proposal perfected? I think that would help us.
Are there any amendments to the substitute motion? Let me put it to you that way. If I don't see them, then I'll declare it perfected. Microphone 2.
Don Hasty, District Superintendent, Dodge City and Hayes. Bishop, I'm just asking about referring the substitute for consideration of the implications in the cabinet's work of appointing pastors if we don't have the same conditions in each appointment related to health insurance.
All right, you cannot refer just a substitute. You have to refer all of it, both of them, back to the cabinet for deliberation.
Okay. Thank you.
And you have to move to do that, Don.
Pardon?
Don, you have to move to do that if that's what you want to do.
Oh, it's in order to do that now, to put the whole matter before us to refer.
Correct.
Well, I don't want to make a speech against the substitute.
You're not
but
making a speech. You're making you're making a move to refer.
Right, but you said that it would mean the main.
Both of them would.
Right, I don't know that I want to hold up the one if it would pass.
No.
You didn't want
Bishop?
Yes.
If I may, we would prefer that we not defer. We really do need to go forward with a policy going into 2020. So the preference would be that we continue to deal with this if we could, please.
I won't make a motion.
Thank you, Don. All right, is there an amendment to the substitute motion? Do I see an amendment to a substitute motion? That'd be somebody with a pink card. I don't see any pink cards.
He's got a pink.
Do you have a pink card?
Kinda.
I'm only seeing half of it, so it is a kind of. Do you have an amendment to the
No,
resolution?
I would like to call the question to substitute. Yes.
All right. The question has been called to substitute. It takes a second. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been seconded. All right. We are now voting on the substitute.
Bishop,
Yes.
I have a question about exactly what we are substituting. If I could offer the question so we're all clear as we can be.
We, as I understand it, we are voting on Resolution 13
This is my question.
to see if that will become the main motion or not.
My question is, when Resolution 13 was presented, what I heard the presenter say was that the wording of Resolution 13 would take the place of the first two lines of what the Board of Pensions presented, and the rest of what the Board of Pensions presented would remain the same. And I think that is certainly.
You're making a speech against right now we
No,
have.
I want to know, are we substituting is Resolution 13 the substitution?
Yes.
That is just going to change the, or is it going to change the entire wording? Because what I heard her say was it would change just the first two sentences.
It would, Mary? Could you go and back to the mic so we can be clear on what we are voting on?
Yes, the motion was just to substitute in the resolution with the first two sentences of the Board of Pensions recommendation ending with the bronze value, that the rest of their proposal is intact.
Lines 2 and 3
Right,
on
page 9,
page 9.
except for the last word.
Okay? All right, let's vote on the previous question. The previous question is we're voting. We're going to vote to end debate. It takes 2/3 to end debate. If you would vote to end debate, if you would agree to end debate, raise your hand. Opposed? Same sign. All right. Now we're going to vote on the substitute motion. If you would adopt the substitute motion, raise your hand. If you would oppose the substitute motion, raise your hand. All right? The resolution is defeated. Motion is defeated. Motion. Do we have any more discussion on the main motion? Microphone 6. Microphone 6, thank you. And, can I see your card? What, yellow? Okay, you're opposing the main motion. Okay, go ahead.
Elizabeth Winger from Harper and Argonia. I am a clergy couple, and my husband is also military reserve. And while we have low initial insurance, we have high deductibles and high out-of-pocket costs. And we use our coverage from the church, not just to pay that additional cost, but to pay health co-pays and deductibles throughout the year. So my question, or my opposition, is to the fact that if something happens, such as my son being in the hospital for 3 weeks in the ICU, which has happened, how am I going to cover some of those costs?
So you're opposed. Okay, so that's a speech opposing. All right. Microphone 4.
I'd like to call the question on this.
If you would call the question, there's no debate. If you're ready to need a second. All right, second. If you're ready to call the question on the main motion, raise your hand. 2/3 are required. Opposed, same sign. All right. So the question is called. Now we're ready to vote on the main motion. I did. Okay. I'm quick. All right, now the main motion is before us, and that's on page 9, the health allowance.
Bishop?
Yes. Yes, microphone 2.
Could you read page 9 in its entirety?
Yes,
again,
I can,
please?
if I had, okay, here it is. All right. Line number 7, delete and are not eligible, and add full-time and three-quarter pastors appointed to local churches that provide a health insurance plan shall receive the equivalent of the conference health allowance. All right, if you would adopt the main motion, if you would oppose the main motion, raise your hand, and the motion passes.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you to the floor. You may never see me up here debate, but thank you.
There, Mike, let me help you with that.